Hi, everybody. Bryan Norcross here, midday on Saturday, with an update on the tropical depression that we expect will turn into Tropical Storm Debby in the Gulf later today or now tonight, maybe. Here's the current situation as of the 11 a.m. advisory. Top winds 35 miles an hour were estimated here to the north of the system, and the movement is to the west northwest, so it continues to head toward the Gulf of Mexico. This nominal center will be in the Gulf of Mexico later on this afternoon, and the pressure has come down some from yesterday, 1,009 millibars. It's getting better organized. You can clearly see on the satellite it has a rounder shape to it, but it's certainly not completely organized. You can see dry air pockets have filtered in there, and you have a cluster down here, and you have more thunderstorms up here. But look how far out the outer bands now of this circulation extend. So if it can pull itself together, it has the mechanics of the general shape that generally is indicative of a pretty significant storm, and the effects spread out over a long distance, much bigger than the state of Florida. Look how big Florida is. Look how big this thing is just in radius here. Okay, let's look at it close up. And what we see close up is that up to the north here, I don't know if you can see it right in there, there's a little bit of a swirl going by there. And then down to the south here, we can kind of make out something turning there, or maybe over in here, or something like this. And that's probably the mid-level center. So in the middle levels of the atmosphere, we have it turning in one place. And then we have this big general swirl centered here where the National Hurricane Center has it located. And so when those two things aren't lined up, it's just a sign of general disorganization, and it needs to organize if it's going to actually strengthen. So even though it has a lot of the mechanics right, it still doesn't have its core together. So as this whole thing moves out over here in the Gulf of Mexico, now it's over the very warm waters. It doesn't have the land and the various terrain in Cuba. There's moderate mountains there, 2,000 feet. There's about 4,000 foot mountains over in here. So part of the flow is getting interrupted by that, not to mention just the general landmass of Cuba. So we have various things going on. Here you can see on the radar coming out of Key West, you can see this general circulation here, which we lose it down here at the bottom because it's out of radar range. But we can also see something that looks like a circulation in here. And again, I think that's the mid-level circulation. So we'll see. Maybe something's right in here as well. So Hurricane Center is taking that middle position, and then we'll just see where it consolidates. But in case it consolidates somewhere down where it can bring tropical storm force winds to southwest Florida, they have tropical storm warnings up all the way up to well north of Tampa Bay. And then in the northern part of the Gulf Coast, hurricane watches now have been extended over all the way to just past Apalachicola. So from more or less Cedar Key around the Big Bend, hurricane watches in effect. You can see where the cone is here. So that's where the focus will be of potentially the strongest winds. And if it stays to the right side of the cone, obviously strong winds here in the Tampa Bay area and so forth. Now, those strong winds on the Gulf Coast, as we just saw last year with Idalia, as we saw incredibly with Ian, will produce storm surge. But it doesn't take super strong winds to produce significant storm surge. So the forecast here on the West Coast from to the north of Perry, so we're southeast Tallahassee here, on down to south of Cedar Key, in these four counties. The counties here are Citrus County and Levy County and Dixie County and Taylor County. So in those four counties, up to 5 feet of storm surge. Now, there are small towns there, but obviously folks live there. Steinhatchee and Horseshoe Beach both had damage in Idalia just last year. And here we go again with potential up to 5 feet above normal high tide of water coming up the coast and up those rivers there in that part of Florida. And then up to 4 feet farther west to near Apalachicola, and also in the Tampa Bay area, up to 4 feet above high tide. Now, what does that mean? For Tampa Bay, with those millions of people that live there, and a lot of them live in relatively low-lying areas. Well, if it comes in at high tide, you're at the high tide line then, and the water could be up to 4 feet. Now, all these forecasts are for somewhere in these areas. So looking to the north, somewhere in this area, the water could be up to 5 feet because the wind kind of comes in bands, and there's no way to predict exactly where the strongest wind is going to be. And this is a large system, and that's why the storm surge forecasts are pretty high, well outside of the cone, because the winds are going to come in like this in bands. If it comes into Tampa Bay, a very strong band drives the water into Tampa Bay at just the right angle, you're going to get, and it happens at high tide. Now, high tide happens more or less midday, early afternoon, so the timing right now doesn't look like that. But just if we don't have the timing perfect, if it all comes together, up to 4 feet above high tide in Tampa Bay. So everybody just needs to be aware, and we'll keep all those things in mind as the storm moves to the north, and I'll show you the timing in a second. But what we're trying to do is emphasize the warnings, get everybody focused on the warnings for their area as opposed to looking at the cone. The cone is going to give us good timing, but the overall warnings are the most important. Notice the up to 4 feet goes down to south of Fort Myers, and then up to 3 feet when we go farther south. Okay, so now let's take a look at that timing, and what you see is that we're anticipating this to be Tropical Storm Debby by the morning hours. When it says the morning hours here, now we're talking about like 8 a.m. in the morning nominally, offshore tomorrow, offshore of Fort Myers. So it would say form as a tropical storm on this schedule sometime before that, maybe in the overnight hours tomorrow. Then moving north, and the forecast is for a 60-mile-an-hour tropical storm offshore of Tampa Bay. If the storm were to get in this location here, where the wind came around like this and had just the angle to push it into Tampa Bay, that would produce the maximum storm surge in Tampa Bay. If the storm, on the other hand, ended up over here somewhere, then the wind is coming around like this, and it's more southerly over here, and you don't get that maximum storm surge. Although, if it does come in up here somewhere, come ashore, then the storm surge can be have the right angle to go into Tampa Bay. So the location of the storm plus the timing of the storm and the angle of the winds is what makes the maximum storm surge, not just in Tampa Bay, but all along the coast. When you get both the high tide and the wind from the optimum angle, that can produce the maximum storm surge. So that's why they have such wide areas. There's no way to predict exactly how those things are all going to come together with the location of the storm and the timing of the tides there along the coast. So the idea here is a 60-mile-an-hour storm. Now, the obvious question is, could this be stronger? And the answer is yes. The weather pattern over the Gulf looks ideal. Remember, we talked about the fact that this was a giant circulation. It's going to take time to consolidate. So maybe it doesn't get to be a tropical storm by tomorrow morning. Maybe that's delayed. So the whole process is delayed. So it's a 50 or 60 mile an hour storm near Tampa Bay. On the other hand, if it does consolidate sooner and we end up with a stronger storm down here, we're going to have a stronger storm up there likely, although there is the possibility of dry air inhibiting it some, and I'll show you more on that in a second. But in any case, take that as a middle ground and say, okay, we're going to be ready for 70 miles an hour, 75 miles an hour. We're going to be ready for weaker, and we're going to remember all the quickly developing storms that we've seen in the Gulf of Mexico over this very warm water, and just see what happens once the system develops and how the projections might change then. So this is not at all in stone, is my point. Then the current timing is for it to come ashore in the morning hours after sunrise, somewhere here between, say, Apalachicola and Cedar Key, according to the cone. And when I say come ashore, I mean the center. Obviously, the winds are much bigger than this, and the storm surge will be affected by the flow around the storm. That's why you have up to 4 feet on this entire coast down here. But the peak winds are going to be somewhere in here, likely, assuming that the system can consolidate. So Tallahassee right now looks like it's on the left side of the storm. The tropical storm watch is in effect for Tallahassee. And as we know, and anybody that's lived in Tallahassee knows, you have those magnificent big trees, and they don't do well in wind because the big long branches just can't stand that, and they're not palm trees that bend. So everybody in Tallahassee needs to be aware of that. Also in Gainesville, I mentioned these because it is August, and people are out of school, but there still are people involved with FSU and UF in Tallahassee and Gainesville, and just be very aware, not to mention all the residents, of course. Well, then we get into a whole different situation because, as you can see, the cone looks kind of crazy. And the idea here is we end up with a weakening storm over land, although a very heavy rain event in here, big threat, including the Jacksonville area. Then the storm is forecast to stall, and the nominal National Hurricane Center track is something like this, and that's why they have it intensifying some over the water. But there's no way to predict exactly what's going to happen here. Some of the forecasts take it out here, turn it into a hurricane offshore, and even turn it back in, or just lollygag it out here or up here. In any case, a significant threat that may turn into an extreme threat for heavy rain, potential storm surge, potential winds that last for days along this coast. We can't predict exactly how many hazards at any one point, but all the hazards of the hurricane will be present there on that coast from North Florida into North Carolina. Looks like it's going to last from late Monday into Thursday. Exactly who and how and where is impossible to tell. But in any case, pay attention to your local officials, because everything about that forecast is going to change dramatically for any one spot along the coast and inland, where flooding is a significant threat as far as everything we know at this point. All right, there's what the models show, and you can see it. Look at them all just kind of making loops and whatnot. In any case, all going very slowly, moving very slowly, so the same areas can continue to get rain and wind and whatever. So everything else about the models, looks like it's in the cone, but once we get up here, all bets are off. There's the consensus, saying the average of them, and you see it just moves up there and kind of hooks and stops, and we end up with some kind of a storm in that area according to the consensus. But exactly what it's going to do is just unknowable at this time. When we look at the forecast uncertainty, okay, where do we have certainty? First of all, we have uncertainty about where it's going to actually move off Cuba and where is the center actually going to form, because it's a big, broad thing now. It's not, it's a kind of a gyre, which is a word for a big rotating disk. So it's big and it has to consolidate. Where is it going to consolidate? We can't be sure, so we say, okay, how about if it does it over here or over here or over here or somewhere else? Let's see what happens. And what we see is there is a big consensus that it is offshore of Tampa, but as the cone showed, and as I said, if it's near Tampa, that really changes what happens in metropolitan Tampa, St. Petersburg. If it's more offshore, then different things might occur, and it may be a bigger effect farther north. But anyway, that's it's still kind of within what the cone was indicating. And then we go farther north and you see it starts to spread out. Okay, what's going to happen? When is it going to slow down? You see some of these models already slow it down. Here we are 6 a.m. on Wednesday, but some speed it up and take it on by. The jet stream is not going to lose track of it. It's going to actually pull it. And then to that 6 a.m. Monday, now watch as we go, and the L's go all over the place, and this is 6 p.m. Wednesday. Some of them still have it back here. Others take it up by Cape Hatteras. So all these possibilities in play, a lot of them over the water where we might get some intensification if it sits there over the Gulf Stream and so forth and so on. So don't let anybody tell you they know what's going to happen in that time frame from Monday to Thursday, because we just don't have any way to know at this point. All right, timing it out here for you. First of all, here's this band coming in. South Florida has had it. It's going to kind of move north. There are more bands in here. You can see the strong winds coming in here. So we're going to continue to get them, and it's going to move north. So here we are later today. The idea is the center is moving off shore. It's been interacting with land. Of course, that has slowed everything down. And then moving north, according to the model here, Tropical Storm Debby forms at some point in here when it can consolidate, and the worst weather is going to be something like this. So that's why they have the tropical storm warnings here and not for Miami, for example. This, as it consolidates, it should pull the worst weather in toward it. But I want you to keep an eye on this very dry air out in here, according to this particular simulation. Now watch as we move farther north. You notice the dry air kind of tries to wrap in, and maybe that's what's keeping it from intensifying more quickly. Not really sure, but you end up with the core of this moisture feed coming up over the state of Florida, depending on how close it gets, where the strongest winds impact and so forth. So here we are late on Sunday, near Tampa Bay. Question is, if the storm were located right where this icon is, look at the direction of the wind. The wind is pushing the water right into Tampa Bay. If that really happens in the evening, that'll be at low tide. That's a good thing. But you are going to see water rise all through around Tampa, St. Petersburg, even in Pinellas County, in the bay part of Pinellas County, you can see water rise there as well. And already we see the moisture feeding up along the Atlantic coast up here, where there's a front up in there, and it'll bang up against that front, and that will cause more rain there. So we have lots to look at here, and a long way to go with this system. So when everybody, especially in the affected areas, and if you have a warning or a watch for your area, especially when it's a warning, storm surge warning or tropical storm warning, or if it turns into a hurricane warning, that tells you that you need to be ready for whatever that effect is that's forecast. And these are all just going to spread up through Florida and then eventually up into Georgia and the Carolinas as we go through the next probably 6 days at least, before maybe 7 days. That we'll be talking about this storm affecting the U.S. All right, that's it for your midday update. I'll be back later on this afternoon, and we'll be on Fox Weather, by the way, and we have continuing coverage. And by the way, famous hurricane tracker Mike Seidel joined us today, and he's going to be part of the team. So if you don't have Fox Weather on your phone, or you don't know how to get it on your TV, you can either scan that QR code now, or you can just go to foxweather.tv. It'll give you all the instructions for Roku and Apple TV and Samsung TV and the app on your phone. Just click the live thing and you'll watch the Fox Weather channel all the time for free. You don't have to worry about your cable system or anything else. And it is available on many, many cable systems as a TV channel as well. So we're all over the place. And we're having full coverage of what will be, we think, Tropical Storm Debby going on right now. And I'll see you back on there this afternoon. All right. Have a good day and stay informed.